Hey, Foot Clan, as we get ready to record our 150th show of the year, we want to take a moment and thank everybody that has supported this podcast on jointhefoot.com. If you're not involved, head over to jointhefoot.com, join our fantasy football community, and become a part of what makes this show great.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast with your hosts, Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, and Mike Wright.
Happy Tuesday, everybody.
150?
150. Whew. 150 shows.
Do work.
That's a lot of shows.
What?
You weren't here for most of them.
Not at least not mentally.
No, I mean,
I checked out about 75 ago.
oh, I only wish that were true because I'm facing you in our playoffs this week in our big league.
I never check out there.
I know, and it's frustrating. And the streak comes to an end because you and I had faced off in the title game in this league for 3 straight years, and we had hoped that at least the possibility would be there, but we ended up in the same bracket.
I was 20 points away.
20 points away
20 points away from making that a possibility.
And you would have been in the other bracket.
Yep.
And you would have had the bye week.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I'm sure everyone would love to listen to us muse about this league all show long, but it is Tuesday, December 8th. We are back again, the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. You can find us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com, on Twitter at the FFBallers. We are also broadcast on the Fantasy Sports Network. Shout out to them.
Hello.
Hello.
Hola, bonjour.
Pat Mayo, say hello. That's appropriate. Yes, they are based in Canada. So we are on YouTube. And you heard me say it before, but we are on jointhefoot.com. That's our fantasy community. We're also on Facebook, on iTunes, yada, yada, yada. We're everywhere.
Oh,
I mean, 150 shows. You probably heard that
You're going
once or twice.
Seinfeld on everybody right there.
I did. I busted it out. So we've got our what do we got today? We got some news and notes.
Maybe the most important waiver wire show.
Possibly.
Big time waiver wire show.
Playoffs.
Less important if you're not in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm taking this week off, fellas. Not because I'm not in the playoffs, but because I'm on the bye week, just waiting for you two. So I'm you know who I'm starting this week? No one. I don't care.
Well,
Yeah,
even if
soak it
you're
up.
on the bye week, we're going to be talking about some quarterbacks who you might want to have for the playoff run. We're going to go through some defenses.
Absolutely.
So there's still some information that even Jason Moore, the bye week-osaurus over there, may want to.
Yeah, you better soak it up, buddy.
Oh, I've got my waiver claims in for this week because I'm playing some keep away.
We were at dinner last night, and I told him, I said, act like you've been there before. But then I realized.
He wouldn't know how to do that.
You guys.
I know, we're jerks. All right, what do we want to do? Let's talk quick question right now. All right? Quick question of the day. What player is going to win fantasy owners a playoff game this week?
This week.
Who's going to win some playoff games for people?
Well, I'm going to go with a character who is officially heating up after basically a hibernation for a majority of this season, and his name is Sammy Watkins.
Oh, yeah.
Who is coming off 2 great games. He had only 3 catches last week, but it was a very tough defensive matchup. The Texans have been shutting down number 1 wide receivers, but he still managed to get it done. So I love Sammy Watkins this week against the Eagles. It could be.
It's juicy.
It's juicy. It's succulent, and
Yeah.
it's sweet. It is everything you want out of a matchup for your first round
You're
playoffs.
you're more of a dessert pick then, and I'm going with more of the. I'm going to go with the fantasy vegetable that is Sean Drone. Sean Drone has the Cleveland Browns this week, and man, is he just getting work. He's just he scored last week against Chicago, and they're just using him.
Sean Drone is the big salad.
He's the big. Okay, another Seinfeld reference. Thank you. Yeah.
Well,
big salad.
I'll stick with the
You guys
food
have a
analogy.
big salad?
I'm going to go with an entree here. I'm going with a main. I'm going with
A
the
main
steak.
course?
Yeah, a steak, which is starting running back. I'm going to go Thomas Rawls. I think he's going to win some people some weeks because he is the type of guy who was picked up either in a need or just as an extra bonus recently a couple weeks ago, and he's going to pay dividends for fantasy owners. So hope you were listening to our show.
Thomas Rawls takes on the Ravens. The
Yes.
Ravens who, in my mind, still won that game against the Dolphins in their 86. So who watched the game last night, by the way?
Well,
unfortunately, all of us.
well, a game, yeah.
Okay, so 3 quarters of the game.
3.5.
3.5 quarters of the game, it was just unbearable. I think I tweeted out that I stabbed myself in the eyes to feel better. That being said, suddenly the punt.
So let's set the table for this situation.
You pointed out for me.
I believe the score was tied.
Yeah.
Time was running
9
down.
to 9.
And Washington had a monstrous defensive hold. Things were setting up for them to march down the field, and they decided to pull a maneuver. And they put in superstar punt returner Deshaun Jackson. And they put him in the back for just in case he can break it to the house. We've seen him pull miracles out when he beat the Giants when the time was over and he ran the punt back. They thought maybe we can get some of that magic.
And then the ball
Cowboys,
was snapped.
The Cowboys snapped, and the punt was in the air. The ball was fielded at about the 25-yard line. And Deshaun Jackson decides to reverse the field and run backwards about 20 yards before eventually fumbling the ball at the 5-yard line.
You know what the best part about it was? And then, of course, in Deshaun Jackson I think it was a summary of his career in 60 seconds because that ridiculous clown show of a play, and then he catches a touchdown pass.
Well, what we're glossing over here is the clown play that was Deshaun Jackson was followed up by 2 clown plays from Darren McFadden, who decides I should probably run out of bounds and save Washington a timeout because that's the friendly neighbor thing to do, and then they score.
I'm sorry, those are 2 really bad teams.
Sit on the ball.
2 bad teams. So yeah, Deshaun Jackson did give us a few moments of entertainment, just like a circus would at the end of that game. So, all right, every week we like to take a minute and we'll go ahead and read a review from the listeners on iTunes or some of the other places that our show is. And so we're going to go ahead and do that right now.
Reviewosaurus Rex.
This one comes in from Arsh23, titled Reversing Wins.
Arsh?
Arsh23?
Yeah.
Reversing wins and withstanding victories. I rarely leave reviews, but these guys deserve it. After a few years of mediocre fantasy advice, I finally found an entertaining podcast that helped me stir up some confidence to reverse a 1-3 start into a 9-4 division championship.
Oh, that's nice.
As I continued to withstand victories, if you need advice to beat up your league mates in your league of record, these are the guys. Thanks, as always. I look forward to listening throughout the playoffs. Well,
thank you.
That's some sweet Arsh right there.
And Arsh is a protein coding gene.
Huh.
Dropping because it's not just football; it's science. It's science on the fantasy footballers. Mm-hmm. Coming up next, the Sciencey Sciencers podcast.
Not as good. It doesn't flow. Sciencey Sciencers.
You didn't go with the fantasy scientist, the FF scientist?
Yeah, that would have been way
that we
easier.
have on the show from time to time?
That name is taken. Our science show name is pending. We're working it out.
I agree with you. I agree with you completely.
News and notes from around the league.
All right. Let's get to it. The Rams have fired their offensive coordinator.
Yeah, take that, Frank.
I feel like I could play the clown music again.
Yeah, probably.
But I already put it away.
This is great news for all Todd Gurley owners. We saw what happened in Miami where the offensive coordinator doesn't give the ball to the running back with a head coach that wants to run, and they fire him and they say run the ball. And for the first time in a couple of years, Lamar Miller finally got 20 carries, runs for 113 yards. Back-to-back weeks, you give Todd Gurley 9 carries, and you say, you're not an offensive coordinator of my running team. Get out of here. So I love this for Todd Gurley owners.
Yeah. It seemed, I don't know, maybe it needed to happen. I don't know. It was Jeff Fisher who was running out of answers, and so his answer was to point a finger at somebody else, and Frank, you're out of town. So I do agree with Jason, though, that back-to-back weeks of giving Todd Gurley 9 carries, I understand sometimes a running back can get game flowed out of a situation, but Todd Gurley can catch the ball as well. And against the Cardinals, I mean, the game flow was not out of hand where you should be abandoning the run.
Nope.
And especially when Nick Foles is the option to throw the ball, you got to give the ball to Todd Gurley more than 9 times.
All right, the Bills coach Rex Ryan has said that Carlos Williams is a possibility to play in Week 14. Yeah, you're not starting him, though.
No, it's just
LaShawn
McCoy. Maybe his upside is a little bit capped. However, he didn't get in the end zone last week. Still got it done.
Yep. Philadelphia Daily News reports Ryan Mathews has cleared one of the league's concussion protocol. On Monday, he could return to practice on Tuesday.
Woohoo!
There was also a report this morning, if you saw it, that DeMarco Murray has aired his frustrations to the owner.
Ooh.
So
Ooh.
things are still going like they've been going for DeMarco, who,
He went to the top.
can I just be honest with you? I'm starting to sour on the guy.
Yeah.
Because the complaining, I mean, first of all, frustrations, yes. I understand when AP is frustrated with his carries and they lose 37 or whatever, when they get destroyed. They won the game. They're tied for first in the division. Let's go talk to the owner about my carries. What? How about let's go pat Darren Sproles on the back and say, hey, nice job, because I want to win.
I want to win, but I want to be the reason we win.
Yeah, but you haven't been.
Right.
Don't you think that's what they're figuring out?
Yeah.
Isn't that the game flow test that they did?
You might be the reason they were losing. You had not been running well before that game for several weeks in a row. Ryan Mathews is the guy that, I mean, this is kind of good news that he's passed the concussion protocol. I'm not saying you should start him, but
I respect players like Darren Sproles or Ahmad Bradshaw, who every time they're on the field, you can tell every last muscle they're twitching to get the next centimeter on the field. They're trying as hard as they can. I haven't felt that way from DeMarco Murray. I see him becoming mentally frustrated in the middle of games, trying to do too much, not listening to the offense and what it's asking. And so they tried something else and they won.
yeah.
Brian Mathews, it's possible he's on your wire. He is a must pick up and stash for the playoffs.
What was the number of ownership you saw yesterday?
55% ownership for Ryan Mathews. That number should be 100%. I mean, he should be on the benches of every team because he has the potential to be a RB1 here. I mean, we saw Darren. If he got the work that Darren Sproles got, he's an RB1.
Let's hypothesize, because that's what we do. Ryan Mathews is healthy and cleared. Would you rather run out DeMarco Murray this week because he complained about it and his workload might come back to him? Or would you rather run out Ryan Mathews?
So you're saying in your situation you have both of those guys?
There's got to be a lot of people that handcuffed him.
Oh,
they just got that poo-poo game from DeMarco. And it's playoff time.
So I'm trying to mentally put myself there. It'd be really, really hard for me to put Mathews in. When even though everything is pointing to the direction of that might actually be the smarter call, it would be such a barrier to sit down Murray, has been the guy who's getting the carries. He didn't last week, and he's been bad the last few weeks. But that's just a mental hurdle of taking some risk. There's an assumed risk by playing Mathews over Murray at this point.
The number of double-digit fantasy games that Ryan Mathews has put up as a backup would help alleviate that worry of starting him. Because even if you play the game and DeMarco ends up out-touching him 15-10, I think Ryan Mathews might end with the better fantasy day. The one thing I'll say about that is, in this hypothetical situation, it would require for me a full week of practice.
Absolutely.
He's got to be a full participant on Tuesday throughout the week, and then I have confidence starting Ryan Mathews.
All right, last bit of news before we get into the waiver wire. The Miami Herald said that Rashard Mathews is expected to miss Week 14 again. We know he broke his ribs, but he was still in the questionable category until late in the week. This is good for Davante Parker owners. Monday Night Football game against the Giants.
Ooh, and if he keeps getting 60% of the yardage from Ryan Tannehill,
just imagine if he throws for 450 yards.
That's a good 300.
Be breaking records.
300 burger.
That's how it works, right?
So before we get to our waiver wire, we want to take a second and thank our sponsor today, MeUndies. I can tell you,
I am wearing tie-dye MeUndies right
from
now.
Personal experience, that MeUndies are the greatest underpants that I have ever put on my butt cheeks. Ever. How about you guys?
It is absolutely true. There's no joke there.
No.
Because MeUndies is telling you, you don't want to wear you don't want to wear comfy underwear. You want to wear the world's most comfortable underwear and that is MeUndies, because they make it out of modal. There's a fabric out there that is softer than cotton.
Way softer.
And it's modal. And MeUndies has figured this out, and they said, let's make underpants out of that, because that's the right thing to do. MeUndies has a ton of different colors to choose from. It's the only place to find styles for both men and women, and a new signature design every month. And they just launched a new boxer line. It's like wearing nothing at all, only better. With the holidays around the corner, MeUndies make the perfect gift. Trust me, these are not your parents' stocking stuffers. This is what we need the Foot Clan to do. Go to MeUndies.com/footballers right now to get 20% off your first order, plus all orders in the U.S. and Canada, bonjour, always ship for free. MeUndies has a money-back guarantee. If you don't love your first pair, keep it. Get a full refund. You have nothing to lose. Order before December 13th, and all your MeUndies will arrive in time for Christmas. For 20% off your first order, the world's most comfortable underwear, head to MeUndies.com/footballers.
And we also want to take a quick second to thank our wonderful sponsor, Topps Huddle app. We love the Topps Huddle app. We've talked about it a ton. All three of us grew up actually collecting cards, collecting trading cards. I remember taking advantage
They didn't have no smartphones back then.
Oh, yeah, taking advantage of kids with a trade where later my mom would make me give that card back to them. You know, great things like that. Well,
yeah, you were a good kid.
the Topps Huddle app, it's brought that wonderful experience into the digital age on your smartphone, on your Android device, on your iPhone. So they've got officially licensed NFL players, all the cards that you want to collect. Now you do it in the digital world on the Topps Huddle app. You trade with your friends. You open packs. Over 300 million packs have been opened since 2012. People love this app. And it's not just collecting. You get to play them. On Sunday morning, you put in your best 11 guys with the cards you have, and you get fantasy points. So for football fans, especially fantasy football fans, the app is a must-have. Download it for free at the App Store or the Google Play Store, and you'll get 10 free packs today. That's the Topps Huddle app.
Put me in, coach.
Yeah.
Playoff waivers, man.
I believe any playoff owner should be sitting in MeUndies right now. That's the appropriate kind of elevated feeling you deserve.
Underpants of champions.
Yeah.
You made the playoffs. Go get yourself some MeUndies. You deserve it.
Right. All right. Let's talk waivers, guys. There's an interesting dynamic that takes place during waiver wire time in the playoffs, because at least for me, I start to look very short term. First of all, yes, I'd love to have the hot new thing that's great in 3 weeks, but who knows if I'm playing in 3 weeks? So I'm focusing on winning this week. It's kind of how the NFL players treat each week to week. You're gonna put somebody out there because you're not taking for granted you're gonna be there the next week. So part of what you do is maybe stop your opponent. That's part of what I'm going to do this week.
Got to play some defense.
100%. I mean, this is where waiver wires change, and expert fantasy players, which are all of the Foot Clan out there, there are tips and tricks to succeeding in fantasy playoffs. You know, you're playing a different game now. You're playing a game where you're not playing against 12 teams.
Nope.
You're not worried about the pickups of other guys. Who's going to pick up this guy if I drop him, right? Look at the rosters that are still in there. You know, for instance, on my team, it sounds ludicrous to drop Randall Cobb. I mean, he hasn't been that great, but he's still Randall Cobb, and we're a keeper league. But the two teams in my bracket and the other team, there is no chance that he could start on your guys' behemoth roster. So if I want to keep a quarterback away from you, if I want to keep a tight end away from you, if I need that defense that plays the exceptional matchup against you guys next week, obviously it's a little different for me since I'm not worried about this current week. But I'm willing to make different moves that I would never make in week 8 because there is a specific game we're playing, and it is beat the guys in the playoffs. That's it.
Yeah, I completely agree. So let's talk some wide receivers. Davante Parker, we just mentioned him. He should be starting again. He had that monster touchdown where he elevated to the moon to catch that ball.
Touched the moon, came back.
He gave it a little high five.
Yep.
So Davante Parker to me is
how good will he be this week, Monday Night Football, at home against the Giants?
He could be as good as Ryan Tannehill will let him be. And the answer to that is I don't know, because Ryan Tannehill has been very disappointing the last couple of weeks. Well, not the last couple of weeks, like last week in particular.
Did they try to turn him into a game manager last week to win that game?
It's so strange because
they won.
There was all the notes of when the OC was being fired down in Miami. Of part of it was because they had such constraints on Ryan Tannehill. He wasn't allowed to audible out, allegedly. These are the notes coming out of Miami. So if you would have thought that part of the new play calling system is now Ryan Tannehill has some audible authority on top of wanting to run the ball more, but then he only threw the ball 19 times. So that's an interesting thing, but Parker, I think, is a great pickup for a wide receiver needy team if you happen to be in that situation.
You were talking this morning, Andy, and I think it was mostly in jest, but I know it's tickling your heart. The idea of
it's happening right now
of starting Davante Parker over Chris Ivory on your own team. How much of that is because he plays on Monday Night Football and you just want last second chance?
No. That he's at home against a really bad pass defense. He's the future of the team. He has the skill to go up and make he's got a little bit of what we saw from Odell Beckham Jr. last year, potentially, right? Like he could have a 3-touchdown game. He's big, he's strong. That kind of thing could happen. And Ivory represents, okay, to me, this week against Tennessee, a baseline. Okay, he'll score 10 points. Tennessee hasn't really given up over 20 to anybody all year. They're third against the run. So it starts to go through your mind that depending on what you need for your team, that's another thought process, is for me, I'm going, do I need 10 points or will I need 25? Because I don't think Ivory gives me the chance at 25 the way that Davante Parker might.
Right. Are you the 1 seed or are you the 6th seed playing the 1 seed?
Well, yeah, and in this case, I'm playing Mike. And, unfortunately, Ivory doesn't play like later in the day because that would be a decision I'd make based on what the score is halfway through the day. So, yeah, it was kind of said in jest because I don't know if I have what it takes to sit down kind of, a top 10 running back that I've had all year long in the final game, but I don't know if it's the worst decision. So stay tuned for that because I'm not going to rule it out. Not going to rule it out. So
you need to start this week. Parker was picked up last week. And these 3 guys are out there. I want to know, who do you pick up and you need the win this week? Brian Hartline, Doug Baldwin, or Dorial Green-Beckham?
Out of those 3?
Out of those 3 guys, you got to pick one up and start him this week.
Out of those 3, I'm going to go with Baldwin.
Yep.
Because he is officially on fire and has a great matchup. I can't remember who they're playing. I just know it's the Ravens.
So let me ask you this. Doug Baldwin or Davante Parker? You've got a great matchup with a guy who's been doing it longer against Baltimore. Who would you feel more confident in?
Baldwin.
Yeah, me too.
Baldwin.
More confident in Baldwin, but I'd still take the upside of Parker, although Baldwin's provided it. So I guess Baldwin's the right answer. I guess Davante Parker's the flashier answer, but Baldwin's the right answer. Now, Brian Hartline, you heard us mention him. If you said, huh? Maybe you didn't realize the guy's had 10 targets, 9 targets, 12 targets, 11 targets the last 4 weeks, 8 catches in 2 straight games. He is plain and simple PPR, produce, okay?
Yeah, I love it.
He's PPR produce because he's basically 8 for 80 or 8 for 65, 8 for, he's just going to produce for you.
You want to be healthy. You walk in that grocery store, you head to the produce section. And this is what you do in fantasy. You head to your produce.
Well, but then you
what have we become?
Brian Hartline means you dig past about 5 or 6 heads of lettuce that you'd rather have, and you have to take him.
So
but
the question mark for Brian Hartline will be
Johnny Manziel.
One, who is the quarterback?
Yeah.
We think it's going to be Johnny Manziel. So will Manziel continue that trend of getting monster targets to Hartline? And there's been some other injuries the Cleveland Browns wide receivers have been dealing with. So
what's the latest on Travis Benjamin? Do we know? I mean,
he says he'll be okay.
Okay, because
I think he'll practice this week. I think he'll play.
Yeah, that makes a big difference, right? Because even though he had 8 catches the week before, meaning he'll
be out.
Travis
he'll be
Benjamin.
out there.
Yeah,
but you're right. I want to, before we get to running backs, I do want to talk about Dorial Green-Beckham because you're going to see a big stat line from him. And so I wanted to do a little research this morning. This is only the second time. Last week he caught 5 of 6 targets last week. It's only the second time in the entire year he's caught more than 50% of his targets. This is not the normal efficiency of Dorial Green-Beckham. He scored, but I'm worried about a mirage here because he played Jacksonville, and that game was a shootout.
His team put up 42 points.
Right, and he caught, he had a big game. But I don't think it's something that I'm counting on. He's at the bottom of this list for me. I'd rather start Hartline than I would Dorial Green-Beckham.
100%.
So, all right, running backs. This guy is owned in most leagues, but it's still in the 80 percentile. So we just want to reemphasize, and it's a very important point. I'm going to let Mike.
David Johnson.
Thank you. David Johnson is at the top of the list. If he's available by some strange anomaly,
By magic.
like all the planets aligned in some weird way to where people were blinded from him, pick him up. 22 for 99 last week, 2 for 21 in the air and a touchdown. However, here's the real question. Do you sign Andre Ellington if you own David Johnson? If he's on waiver wire?
Sure. I'm not.
Because what if he fumbles a couple more times?
Yeah, if he fumbles again let's say Ellington is active, which he may or may not be with that turf toe. If David Johnson gets benched, to me, it's a very committee thing between Ellington and Kerwin Williams. They're not going to give Ellington a full workload.
Yeah, it's a handcuff. I think the playoffs are a decent time to make sure you've got your handcuff of your studs. So an injury handcuff is how I see him, but. Not
now
much
you're going to be there to watch him live, right?
Absolutely.
Will you try to sing that audibly to where he could possibly be?
You better believe I will.
Now, do we want to tell? We should tell the people what we got on Twitter, because obviously, okay. First of all, we got a lot of David Johnson's with musical notes,
And that was
surrounding them.
appropriate. That
Yes.
was the right
Appropriate.
thing to do.
However, we got a video.
Oh, yes.
It's a beautiful video.
It should be spoken of.
We retweeted it. It was the tweet, and I replied. I said, this is the tweet of the century.
It was.
It was a member of the Foot Clan. It is their daughter, age 2 to 3 or so, and she's singing David Johnson. It is it is magic. It is magic.
Wasn't she next to a Christmas tree?
She was next
I mean,
to
it
a
was
Christmas
just perfect.
It's Christmas
and he
magic.
was like a present to
Yeah.
owners on waiver wire. So I loved it. It was beautiful. All right. Ryan Mathews, we talked about him. He should be picked up, right?
Absolutely.
And he's available in half of your league, so go get him.
I wrote one note, and it said, impossible to trust DeMarco Murray, and that's just the truth. We talked about that at length, though. So let me mention some other names. Ownership percentages vary here.
Most of these guys are handcuffs that we think are somewhat important.
Okay, before we get to that, then let me talk about James White, because he's really
Okay.
not a handcuff.
Yeah, that's fair.
James White had a couple touchdowns on limited work 2 weeks ago. Did pretty much nothing a week ago. Then this past week, I guess I might have messed my weeks up there. All right, this past week, though, he was back. 13 targets, 10 catches. So the question is would you roll James White out there? That's the question we need to know. Would you start him over Charles Sims, another guy on this list?
Yes, I would start him over Charles Sims. I think he's in that Dion Lewis role enough to where he could have work through the air. What did he catch? Like 10 of
13.
10 of 13. That's a good baseline.
And a touchdown.
Yeah, so I would rather have him over Sims. Yes.
I don't
right.
think the baseline is 13 targets.
No.
So it's flex at most for me.
Well, they were in a situation of major comeback role again, too. There were a lot of let's pick up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yards, stop the blitz, throw it out to White. So
And of note, Amendola, who played and had a pretty good game.
He did.
He was limited all week. So in practice, they could have been going heavily to James White. So if Amendola is practicing back in full, then those targets in the game plan might be to Amendola.
really, really good point. All right, another guy I want to mention that might be just outside of the handcuff realm now is very similar, Bilal Powell.
Yes.
Bilal Powell had 13 targets, just like James White did. He caught 8 of them, and he makes his money in those PPR leagues the same way James White does. But he had a better week, statistically, than Chris Ivory did in most leagues.
And the same thing, the Jets were in a more of a comeback mode, so that put Powell on the field because of passing situations. But I agree that Powell has standalone value on top of being the handcuff that you want to own for the Jets.
Okay, and we're going to put out our rankings later tonight, I believe. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be late tonight or it'll be tomorrow.
It'll be before the Thursday night game.
That's right. Yeah, it depends. Sometimes it takes some time. So pay attention to where we have Powell in relation to some of the other guys in the PPR rankings. That'll help you make some decisions there. Powell or White?
Ooh,
That's
man.
tough. So Powell this week takes
Tennessee.
on the Titans, and White takes on the Texans. Because of that, I think I would go
White? Or were you going to say Powell?
I was going to say Powell, but then I'm thinking,
the Titans' rush defense is great, so there's an argument that could be made that Powell would be more involved.
I would start, out of these two guys this week, I would probably start James White over him because I think there's just a higher scoring offense there, and so more chance for a touchdown. That would be my only reason. I'm not confident that White's going to outproduce Powell by any means.
All right, some quick handcuff discussion. Juwan Thompson, Charles Sims, Robert Turbin, Terrence West, Boom Herron, Jay Ajayi, Fitzgerald Toussaint, and maybe people need to be introduced to him.
Yeah, Fitzgerald Toussaint is backing up D'Angelo Williams now for the Steelers. There was the assumption it would be Jordan Todman, but when D'Angelo was out, Fitzgerald was the guy who got a couple carries, which we don't have a ton to go on of news out there, but remember, D'Angelo Williams is 32 years old. You have to be prepared, right?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you have to be prepared for sure, just in case something happens in your playoff run.
Yes.
And I don't know how excited I'd be about it.
I'm curious.
I completely agree, but
I'm curious, though, if, let's say this game, D'Angelo goes down, would you then trust just starting Fitzgerald Toussaint?
That's where I said I would not be excited about it, but at least you'd have that option in an emergency situation. And the truth is, I mean, we've seen D'Angelo Williams, who clearly does not have the same skill set as Le'Veon Bell, succeed because the offense is overpowering. So it's really funny. I got a ridiculous text, like a notification from one of my sports scores app. They break news. Here's the news that they broke. NFL Power Rankings. Steelers could beat any playoff team if they got in.
Cool story, bro.
Yeah. Well, breaking news.
Wow, they could win if they were in the playoffs.
Wow. I will say this in their defense. I texted you guys after that Steelers game and said, I do not want to play the Steelers in the Super Bowl as a Cardinals
fan.
If we get there, please don't let – I would rather face the Patriots than the Steelers.
If the Cardinals lose to the Steelers for a second time in the Super Bowl,
we're not even going to go
This show
there.
will be over.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, would Mike and Big Ben owes us one.
There.
Yeah. Next. Hey.
Sorry, I'm lingering on thinking about the last Super Bowl.
Back to the waiver wire. So normally waiver wire is really made in like the running backs or getting that great wide receiver. In the playoffs, I find that the tight ends, quarterbacks, and defenses, because you generally have one of those positions started on each team, they become more important because you're playing both your team's needs and your opponent's team's needs. You can't do that in week 5, but here you can. And so if you've got a guy across the way that's got a terrible tight end problem or an awful matchup for their quarterback or something like that, then you can play keep away, which I know you're doing, right, Andy?
I am going to do that with Mike, yeah. He knows it. I'm going to take one of his quarterbacks away.
Yes. And so to speak to Jason's point, quarterbacks is kind of harder to play keep away because there's generally at least a few solid streaming options. Tight end, I think it's easier to keep away because this week it's really between Sefarian-Jenkins for people who are paying attention. Austin Sefarian-Jenkins played very limited snaps and saw a decent amount of the targets, including an end zone target, which he unfortunately dropped. Richard Rodgers is coming off that huge game, so he will
draw all the attention.
He will be a hot pickup, whether or not that's the right move because he's really not produced at a high level. I mean, he's great if you need 2 catches for 30 or 40 yards.
I think 40-something was his career high, or was his year
45,
high.
Yeah.
That's what he does, and then occasionally scores. So he's not a terrible play. But between those two guys, those will be the bigger pickups. So let's say you're matched up against a Gronkowski owner who didn't make a move to get one of these guys, or you see that maybe they have Crockett Gilmore who went down. You pick up Sefarian-Jenkins, put him on your bench, and hide him away. You put him in the dark, in the shadows where the other team cannot play him.
What are you guys' thoughts on Will Tye at the tight end position?
For Giants?
Because he was in consideration for me to sign last week. With Larry Donnell's probably not even going to come back this season. Will Tye was 3 for 70 again last week. He had 74 yards the week before. He's kind of interesting, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a name that that most people haven't even thought of or considered because they just haven't. He hasn't been around long enough.
Kind of below the radar,
the name recognition. But I do think Will Tye he's a decent flyer for a tight end if you're really struggling.
The main problem I have with him at the tight end is what I look for in a tight end is I look for a guy that has a baseline of receptions and that's used in the red zone. Because really a tight end, whether or not they had a good game, is generally comes down to whether they got a touchdown. I don't think he's used that much in that role. Maybe he fills into the Donnell role, but he hasn't had a touchdown on the year yet. So, that's just maybe that just means it's coming.
Yeah, he's due.
Yeah, well, and we just spoke. Larry Donnell was the starting tight end. So, I mean, he has limited, 5 for 56, 6 for 74, 3 for 70 the last 3 weeks. That seems like a baseline as the tight end.
Yeah.
I agree with you. He hasn't scored, but maybe it's time. We'll see. Maybe it's Tye.
Ooh.
Yeah. What? Zach Ertz finally got in the end zone.
Hooray! Good transition.
He's been in the end zone and open many times this year. So
okay, I should stipulate he caught a pass.
Yeah, one of the balls reached him in the end zone this week, so that was great.
But yeah, okay, so if you're choosing between Austin Sefarian-Jenkins and Richard Rodgers this week, I know my pick.
Jenkins
all the way.
Targets.
And I don't like
matchup.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that not only is it great for Austin Sefarian-Jenkins, but it's also bad for Richard Rodgers. The Cowboys are not. I mean, you sat Rule 86. You sat Jordan Reed against the Cowboys for just cause. So, yeah, I would take Austin Sefarian-Jenkins.
All right, so quarterback time. Quarterbacks to pick up in the playoffs and stream to grab them before someone grabs them from you. Who are guys that you personally like a lot for the playoff run? Jason, I mean, we're going to get into this, in a moment, too, in our streaming section, so it's kind of redundant.
Well, it's not that redundant because in the waivers, this isn't necessarily – this is the week right now where it's like, okay, I made the playoffs. I'm in. I have to focus on the playoffs. And so it's not always just this week in the sense that if you're a streamer – and you can look at your matchups and you can carry multiple quarterbacks. So you might have your guy for this week, but he might have a terrible matchup in week 15. Or let's say you're the Big Ben owner. Are you going to play Big Ben against the Broncos in week 15 and you've got an extra roster spot?
Yeah.
So you're looking at a guy in week 15 you can grab. Mathews Stafford. He's probably owned, but he's a great option.
He's at 79%, so mostly owned.
Mostly owned. Blake Bortles has probably the best, in my opinion, set of matchups throughout the playoffs. He's got the week 16 against New Orleans.
And
I really like that.
An interesting fact about Blake Bortles and Matthew Stafford. Blake Bortles, in our scoring format, currently sits as the number 6 quarterback. Matthew Stafford is owned in a higher percentage of leagues in ESPN than Blake Bortles. People, Blake Bortles, what does he have to do?
Do you think if his name was Johnny Touchdown instead of Blake Bortles that he would be owned in more leagues?
It's very possible. But we have this. Wasn't this the discussion that led to Bort?
Yeah, you're right. I just remembered that too. We've talked about this. Hey, let me tell you something. In case you're curious, I'm not sitting Big Ben against Denver.
So wait, can I ask you a question? Would you rather start Big Ben against Denver or Matthew Stafford against New Orleans?
Big Ben against Denver.
That's ridiculous.
Let me read you a number. 280 yards, 3 touchdowns. 33.5 fantasy points against Denver.
Is that Derek Carr?
No. It's Tom Brady. It's Tom Brady. I'm not sitting Big Ben in my playoff matchup.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with Andy for that. But there are.
It's a tempting. If you had to choose things from the stars that you wanted to tempt me with, Stafford against the New Orleans defense is a good one. But I'm not going to do it. I'm just throwing it out there in case there's somebody else who wants to be, strong with Big Ben. I want you to know you've got an advocate in me because I'm not going to sit down Big Ben in the playoffs.
He has the weapons to beat him.
Exactly.
And when I started looking at the playoff matchups and saw that juicy matchup, the one thing I thought as a football fan was, oh, I want to watch that game. I want to see I want to see Big Ben and those weapons against that defense
I
and see
thought
what
you were going to
happens.
say you wanted to see Fitzgerald Toussaint.
So, okay, well, let's stay on Denver for just a second. You're Week 14. You're a Derek Carr owner. Are you going to play Derek Carr against Denver, who last
No.
time he had 250 and a touchdown?
No.
Of course not.
Okay, Week 16. Let's look even further ahead. Andy Dalton. Are you going to play Andy Dalton in Denver
No.
against the Broncos?
Nope. I'm putting Brady and Big Ben in a separate category due to the
I agree.
offense and their players. So
I agree.
those are great questions.
So
So if
let's-
you're those owners, you need to plan ahead.
So let's talk, guys. So we had Bortles and Stafford, who they're probably owned. Guys that are probably not owned in your league. Brian Hoyer.
I love Brian Hoyer as a waiver pickup for the playoffs. Love him.
His schedule this week a little bit tougher against New England. However, after that, the Colts and the Titans. Great matchups for Hoyer, who Hoyer has really been getting it done all year.
3 touchdowns again last week.
He's got DeAndre Hopkins. His running game.
9 receivers. He threw to 9 different receivers last week.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's very impressive by Brian Hoyer.
Yes.
And a great stat nugget. I did not realize
Yeah.
that, but Hoyer is he's a great streaming option.
In a six touchdown league, do you want to know how many games when he's played obviously the whole game, not just gone out with concussion? How many games in a row has been over 20 fantasy points?
All of them?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Basically all of them since he came back from that injury early. So he's got a safe baseline, and he's had several games. He's had a couple of games too over 30. So definitely a good option in the right matchup, and his schedule's great.
And then you got the rookie sensation who's he's rising up the crowds of Tampa Bay. Jameis Winston, who this week plays the New Orleans Saints, then he gets the Rams, and then he gets the Bears. All 3 are plus matchups.
Yeah, it's weird because of how the Rams started the year to look at that
Right.
St. Louis schedule and say that's a plus matchup. But weirdly enough, it is a plus matchup for fantasy quarterbacks.
And how about this guy, Tyrod Taylor? This week he gets the Eagles, then he gets Washington, and then Dallas.
Yeah, I would have no problem. He's been on fire, too. 2 straight great weeks, and then this matchup, he should have another great week.
So there are guys available on your wire who you can pick up. I will also include Jay Cutler, who was granted very disappointing last week and has been in a bit of a slump fantasy-wise, but those were against some tougher matchups like Denver. But coming up weeks 14 through 16, Washington, Minnesota, who we need to evaluate them because they were just destroyed. Where will they be? I'm not sure. But Washington, Minnesota, and Tampa Bay. Three pretty good matchups for a fantasy quarterback.
All right, before we get into the full stream ahead section and give you our favorite streaming quarterback for this week, let's talk about defenses.
Yes.
So this week, defenses that you need to have, who's at the top of that list? I know the Lions, for me, are at the top in a couple of my playoff leagues.
The Lions are the top streaming defense for me this week. I'm with you because they take on the Rams. And you could tell me, hey, Mike, what if Case Keenum is the quarterback for the Rams? I will say good.
Start the
Good.
Lions.
I will start the Lions. Happily against either Keenum or Nick Foles.
Okay. Who else do we like, Jay?
Another team that has a great matchup this week, you've got the Bears against Washington. Washington, we saw how wonderful their offense was last night. And the truth is the Bears are a good defense. They started the year terrible for a couple of weeks and kind of got a bad rap. But over the last, section of the year, the last probably half of the football season, they've been a really good defense against the pass, against the run. They've done enough to win, and they turned around from what looked like a team playing for the first pick to a team trying to make the playoffs. So
In the Washington, the secret was revealed last night. You just line up 2 linebackers in the A gaps, and the Washington offense is just shut down.
Bewildered.
There's nothing they can do,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous. Let's just run this. It's like playing Madden. When you find that one play that works, blitz your linebackers up the A gap against Washington, you get success.
Yep. Yeah. Anybody else you want to talk about defensively?
The Giants take on the Dolphins. Tannehill's been a turnover machine. The Jets take on Tennessee. And then in the off chance that the Chiefs are available, they play San Diego. And Phillip Rivers is amongst the leaders of throwing a pick six.
Oh, we can only hope for that this week. Can't we, Mike?
You're a smelly face.
I may or may not have the Chiefs defense.
Full stream ahead.
All right, let's start this streaming quarterback segment with a little quiz.
Oh.
And here's how it goes, because I'm going to give you my guy. Which quarterback will Mike not have on his team this week against me? Who is
T-Mobile?
Tyrod Taylor. There's no chance on this earth that I'm allowing Mike, the fantasy hitman, right, to use his $0 fab money and take away Tyrod Taylor.
That's a good play.
Yeah.
He's near the top of my list.
Well, he should be.
Near
Because
the top.
he's my stream of the week. He's 45% owned still and plays the Eagles. And I underline the Eagles. In our scoring format of 6 points per touchdown, the Eagles have given up 40+ to 3 straight quarterbacks.
Wow.
And Tyrod Taylor has been playing well. He's taken more deep shots. Mike likes Sammy Watkins for a reason, because they know they can win by getting the ball to their best offensive weapon. He's got a rush. I think he had a rushing TD last week.
Yep.
And I think he's just, a bona fide stud this week.
Okay, so I can do one better than the Eagles. The Eagles, who have given up 40 in our scoring system 3 weeks in a row. This team has given up more than 40 in 4 of 5 matchups, but 2 of those were more than 50. And that's the New Orleans Saints, who get the rookie Jameis Winston, who is my stream of the week. He has not had a single-digit fantasy game all year. His baseline is fine. He can run the touchdown in if need be. He's been throwing touchdowns. He hasn't been throwing picks like he did in the beginning of the year, and I don't expect him to implode against the New Orleans 32nd ranked defense. He's a great streaming candidate. For me, I feel like he's a guy that if you're streaming, you've got this really solid team, and you just need a quarterback that's not going to completely poop the bed. You're okay with Winston.
Don't crap the team.
Don't crap the team. You're okay with Winston, but I think he's got the potential to have one of those 3 or 4 touchdown games. I could see this.
Are you okay? Jason's, if you've been following the show this week, he's had a tough time.
Here's the type of game that I expect it to be a little bit higher scoring. I expect him to throw touchdowns and interceptions. I think it's going to be one of those games where he could have 4 touchdowns and 2 picks.
Here's what's nice. They're in the playoff position right now, right?
Tampa Bay, yes.
They are playing better. They have a full complement of offensive weapons for the first time for Jameis Winston, of Vincent Jackson, Mike Evans, Austin Sefarian-Jenkins, Charles Sims, and Doug Martin.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So this is a team ascending, going against a defense that belongs in collegiate football.
And you yes, and you had said, remind me the exact stat if you can remember, but before the bye, Jameis Winston.
Yeah, I do remember the stat.
Yeah.
He was in the bottom 6 of QBR as a quarterback before the bye. Since the bye, he's in the top 6 of QBR. That's the kind of ascension he's made. We all thought Mariota, after that first week where he had like 5 touchdowns and Winston threw like 74 pick sixes, that it was trending Mariota's way. And Mariota's had these boom games. Winston's been the better quarterback. And his team is winning.
Yeah.
For my stream, I'm going to stay in the flames with a man who gets no respect in the fantasy football game.
No respect.
No. Yeah.
Oh, I tell you, I get no respect.
He gets respect on this show almost weekly.
Yeah, he was my stream of the week last week.
He's been, I think he's been our highest streamed quarterback. He probably
has to be.
have
Half of the weeks he's our
I
stream.
streamed him twice. He didn't do nothing for me.
Oh, he's blown up for me every time I've streamed him.
Well,
he gets no respect.
Yeah, so I'm going with Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's at home. He takes on Tennessee. Ryan Fitzpatrick, the last couple weeks, all he's done is thrown for over 600 yards and 6 touchdowns, and he is going to take on Tennessee, who I lost my spot. This is what Tennessee has done the last 2 weeks. They've given up over 600 yards and 8 touchdowns.
Blake
to
Bortles,
the quarterbacks.
5 touchdowns last week.
And Derek Carr 3 the week before. So Tennessee, yeah, they give up points, and Ryan Fitzpatrick is playing fantastic with his weapons of Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker. It's hard to beat those guys, and Ryan Fitzpatrick only owned in 42% of ESPN leagues.
Unbelievable.
So
Unbelievable. Yeah, he's performed hugely. I like players on teams that are competing for playoff spots, especially with good coaches. And the Jets are right in the thick of things, trying to fight for a playoff spot. Huge win last week. They're at home. They got to get it done.
Yeah, Todd Bowles is great.
Yeah. All righty. That is it for today's show. Well, nothing else to say. There you go. So we are going to be back with our Sits of the Week tomorrow. We're going to have our our mailbag show and answer a bunch of playoff questions, do our best to get you a victory this week. We want to see a ton of tweets, pictures of you with your trophy. That's the goal. That's what we set out to do 150 shows ago.
Yeah, and if you're listening and you didn't make the playoffs, good for you. You are about to make the playoffs next year. Because one of the mistakes that people make when they don't make the playoffs is they stop following the fantasy news at the end of the season, and that hurts them going into the next season more than they realize. So keep listening.
Well, we'll be here. You might as well hang out with us.
Yep, all year round.
All year round. So, Mike, any parting words?
We need friends.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. I'm going to hit the button now. Thanks, Mike. I agree with you. We'll catch you tomorrow, everybody.
Our friends are football.
Yeah, our friends are football. Thank you.
Goodbye.
That's good grammar.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com and follow us on Twitter @TheFFBallers.